There are very weird things going on in the world that I think you have a unique lens on. So over your shoulder, I see Ayn Rand.
Yeah.
And we just had a socialist get elected as the mayor of New York City. So as a sovereignty guy, as somebody who thinks about money and wealth from cause and effect ground up, how do you feel about that?
Oh, yeah. Well, first of all, I don't follow politics closely. I have heard of this individual being elected. I found it very concerning. People were reposting him tweeting Marx's infamous line, from each according to their ability, to each according to their need. And like, if you've been a student of history, you will know that those words have, underpinned the murder of millions, hundreds of millions potentially. This idea that we can just come together in brotherly love and organize an economy, like, it doesn't work, right? People move based on incentives. And so, as Mises proved in his crowning achievement of the Austrian business cycle theory, like, socialism/communism does not produce prices. Therefore, there is not data propagating throughout the market space. So you end up with just the government being the arbiter of all goods and services. You end up with a lot of shortages, a lot of surpluses, and a lot of coercion and confiscation, basically. So it's it may sound, benign. Oh, this idea of all of us coming together and ignoring money and ignoring market incentives and ignoring economics, and we'll just, from each according to their ability, to each according to their need. It has such a romantic tone to it, but the reality couldn't be further opposite almost. Like, it is an actual murderous ideology. So to see it coming back, I think is very concerning. Now, my deeper conspiracy theorist hat thinks, because this guy is, he's Iranian. Is that right? Middle Eastern?
He's from Uganda.
Uganda. Okay. My mistake then. I thought he was Middle Eastern.
He might be, I actually don't know his ethnicity. His nationality is he was born in Uganda.
Right. And he's a socialist. He's also been accused of being an anti-Semite, at least by his critics online. I don't know if that's accurate or not.
Certainly, he won't condemn the phrase globalize the intifada. So I would not say that he is a friend of Israel, to be sure.
Okay. And so, my deeper conspiracy theory hat thinks maybe you let a guy like that get elected so that you can justify more atrocities in the Middle East. You foment Americans, associating Middle Eastern with socialist, with anti-Israel. And then if he does a bunch of bad things in New York, then that justifies atrocities abroad.
Now I'm curious. All right, I put my conspiracy hat on. Who would be driving that agenda?
The term that people like to use is the deep state. I have no idea who that is. And again, this is just a speculation. I have nothing to back it up. But I think politics is a complete sham. Utter, complete sham. Javier Milei, for instance, the libertarian candidate, right, that's been elected in Argentina, he's not libertarian at all, right? The chainsaw he was going to take to the state, which was a platform he ran on, the central bank he was going to abolish, they're still expanding the money supply. Seyfedin Amous has done a lot of good work on this, especially on Twitter, just showing how oxymoronic it is for this guy to even call himself a libertarian. He's just a closet statist, basically, but he's putting all this lipstick on the pig, saying he's implementing these libertarian policies, and it's just. Now,
do you think he would institute the policies if he was able? Like, they're already behind the 8 ball. So is it possible that coming in and just being sort of laissez-faire, there's so much momentum going in a negative direction? Or do you think that, no, he's just another guy that wants control, wants to see the state wield power, and he's doing whatever he needs to do to wield that power?
I think he is another puppet. I think all these politicians are puppets for deeper power structures. I think nation states are front organizations. When we even think in terms of like, what is the United States doing? What is China doing? It's like, you're not mapping your mental model onto the resolution of reality, right? Reality is composed of individuals that act. We form cohorts and coalitions, and we struggle for power amongst ourselves. We don't move as one indivisible unit called the United States, right? There are millions of power structures inside the United States vying for control. And it's not just political, it's often economic as well. So I think the world is basically a bunch of gangs, and nation states are, the biggest gangs, But when you get people thinking in those terms, you can distract them from the other games
that they control. Those terms, what do you mean? What are the
terms of the nation states themselves, right? Like U.S. foreign policy, Chinese trade policy. Like these things do have effects, but it obfuscates the reality of who's in actual control. For instance, the shareholders of the Federal Reserve in the United States, right? There's an undisclosed set of shareholders. They have a lot more power than any politician that's ever in office. But you never hear that discussed in media.
You do if you listen to my channel. So I talk about
there you
it
go.
endlessly.
Thank God for decentralized media.
Yeah. Okay. That's very interesting. This is not the mental model that I thought you had of the world. Okay. So let's go with Javier Milei. I think a lot of people have been broadsided by Trump and Secretary Bessent doing the, whatever they call it, the currency swap, where they're essentially bailing them out. I think a lot of people were surprised by that. Hey, if these systems are so good and these policies work so well, why do you suddenly need a bailout? So you think that there's something more, and I'm putting a word in your mouth, but nefarious. There is a power structure that people are trying to hide from us. And this is a way for us to see the real movements of that underlying power structure. Now, if you don't know specifically who they are, help me understand how you map what goes on and how you interface with the real world, if like that's an unknowable sort of, again, you're not using the word evil, but I will paint that brush.
Yeah. So the term that I use is the shareholders of central banks, right? I've identified, in my opinion, central banking is the most problematic institution in the world. It controls the money supply, controls the interest rate, which is the price of time or the price of money. This is the most important price in the world. That price is being centrally planned rather than discovered like all other market prices. So that itself is very problematic. It's an anti-capitalistic institution that underpins all economies worldwide, even the so-called capitalist ones. So as I've said before on your show, if money is 1/2 of every transaction and the money itself is Marxist, and this isn't an opinion, this is 1848 Marxist Manifesto to the Communist Party, measure number 5, the state has to have a central monopoly on cash and credit in order to be communist, right? It's a pillar of communism. So we have a pillar of communism here in the US and in every nation state worldwide, that we have central banks. So if money's 1/2 of every transaction and the money is Marxist, then how could we even begin to call ourselves free market capitalists, right? We are at best 50% capitalist and at best 50% Marxist. And so this is like that's what I try to focus on. I'm not looking for the who done it, like who are these individuals, who are the bad guys, because I don't believe that's very useful. I think it's that people ultimately are incentive responsive creatures and that you have to reform the incentive landscape itself. That's how you change human behavior or human action over time.
Fair.
It's not useful to just vote harder or even have a revolution and, uninstall this guy and uninstall your new guy. Like that never works. That just leads to the endless cycle of bloody revolutions.
It's interesting. I will reject the idea that it doesn't work. It isn't stable. It works for a while. I think part of the problem that we have right now is that it worked for so long here in the US that we're forgetting that you have to earn a functioning government. You have to earn a functioning economy. You have to be prepared to be hardcore, disciplined, et cetera, et cetera. But I want to get back to this. So, okay, world is gangs. The worst gang of all is the central bank. I'm going to try to find the perfect way to ask this question, but if I don't nail it, I'm going to keep going until I get there. What I'm trying to figure out is whenever you have a philosophy, take physics. If you put forward a philosophy of physics, your philosophy must accurately describe the world that we see. Otherwise, I know it's false because I see the world, I'm interacting with it. So when you think about the philosophy of what drives governments, what incentives the gangs or anybody else are following, it's going to have to describe the world that I see. Nation states, that you can create stability in some countries. America's been great. The West has been great for a long time. So if half of the money is, at least half of the economic exchange is Marxist, does it need to be? Like, why does that rise up?
Why does that emerge?
Consistently, yeah. We will get right back to the show in a second, but first, let's talk about surviving holiday travel and snacks. You can't control your holiday travel. Flights get delayed, plans fall apart, you end up stuck in some airport terminal watching the clock while your only food options are overpriced garbage. That's why I always travel with Paleo Valley beef sticks in my bag. They are not only an insurance policy, they're a fantastic snack, and they stop me from getting stuck somewhere hungry with only terrible options. Most people cave when they're hungry, desperate, and they just basically are willing to compromise at that point to eat something, anything. I do not want that to happen to me. These beef sticks are 100% grass-fed, grass-finished beef. 6 grams of protein, 0 sugar, no artificial preservatives, and don't let holiday travel derail your health. Be prepared. For the holidays, get up to 35% off your order. Click the link below to save. And now, let's get back to the show.
I think humans are opportunistic. So if there's the possibility of monopolizing and controlling the money supply, then if that's available to any set of human beings, then they're going to embrace that opportunity. There's this great clip of I think it's a New Zealand central banker, and he says it very succinctly. He says, "Central banking is a great business. We print money and people believe it." That sums up pretty nicely what this institution does. It's a currency counterfeiting cartel. And the reason it emerges, I think, is because of opportunism. We could go into a bit deeper of a discussion. It's like, okay, gold is actual free market money, right? This is something that emerged on the market. It did not require any government intervention to become money, unlike fiat currency. Fiat currency requires anti-competitive laws. It requires legal tender laws. It requires legal coercion to exist, basically. That's not true for gold. What's the problem with gold is that it's heavy and it's physical and you can't move it across a telecommunication network very easily. So as the world modernizes from gold standard to telecommunications, our information systems started to outrun our monetary system, right? We're transmitting promises to gold, not actual gold. And in that accumulation of promises, you get a lot of counterparty risk. And when that counterparty risk accumulates at large, you get what's called systemic risk, right? A lot of people owe a lot of people money, but it's all deferred settlement. There hasn't been any final settlement to occur yet. So you get all of this tension, right? And Jeff Booth on the show a long time ago summarized this well. He said, currency wars lead to trade wars, lead to real wars, right? Or as Bastiat said a long time ago, if goods don't cross borders, soldiers will. So the opportunism of individuals to control the money supply and have a business that basically produces perpetual profits, right? It's impossible to be unprofitable when you print money out of thin air, right? So your shareholders are enriched ad infinitum. You can then use the purchasing power stolen to that money printing to fabricate false academic narratives like Keynesian economics, fake news, propaganda, right? To convince the victims that 2% inflation is really good and healthy for you and you need it for a growing economy. Even the term inflation itself is a euphemism. The money is depreciating. That's what's actually happening. Nothing's inflating. The nominal prices of assets denominated in the depreciating money are inflating. So that euphemism of people like, yeah, growth sounds better. I'd rather have inflation than deflation. That term alone, I think, is a purposefully implanted euphemism to get people thinking in terms of inflation being a good, necessary, and healthy thing.
Okay, so I want to.
So what we need to do is remove the opportunity, and that gets us into the Bitcoin conversation.
Remove the opportunity. Okay, we'll get to that in a second. The mile markers that I'm picking up here in terms of your worldview are there is something in the human psyche that longs for control. If it needs to be coercive control, it will be coercive control.
I don't think it's control. I don't think it's control. I just think it's pursuit of profits. Just pursuit of profits.
That is not my understanding of what you just walked through. So if it were just pursuit of profits, then it wouldn't naturally follow that you would get central banks, but we do get central banks. And so when I look at the world and I say, whatever philosophy comes up, it's got to describe that. And given that central banks, as far as I can tell, are everywhere, then whatever the philosophy is has to account for the fact that it becomes everywhere. Also, you said that basically even nation states are just gangs. So that tells me that gangs rise up. Very easy to understand why that is. Weak men need to congregate in order to protect themselves from strong men. I don't think that's bad, though I'm sure the use of the word weak makes it sound like I think it's bad. I don't. I can certainly understand how if your tribe is constantly being raided and the cost is you dead, wife raped, then I get why people real fast go, I'm going to start banding together with a bunch of people. We're going to come up with ways to protect our stuff. So I understand that, but there is something that's driving people that if they can get more and more control, they will seek it out, which is why you get the central banks, because you're not entering into a world where people can't profit and you create a central bank. America didn't have a central bank until 1913. In fact, our best years of growth were before the central bank. So there is something else in the human psyche
that's a good
that
question
leads
right there.
people. Well, I feel like you've already answered it, which is
but
that,
why were the best years prior to the implementation of the Fed?
Because you have creative destruction and you don't calcify in terms of creating a caste system where people can't lose. So when you have, like, if you believe, as I believe, that innovation is almost all that matters, that freedom is necessary for innovation, that people will do well for a while, but then they'll burn away, and that the collective cares not at all whether Elon Musk is the greatest thing for 20 years and then falls off the face of the earth and ceases to be interesting at all. And so if people can create regulatory moats or otherwise, or like with central banks where, and this is one of those things, it hides in plain sight, and I don't have simpler words to say it, but inflation is stealing from everyone and only giving to those. Well, I probably got a lot of the stuff from you when I first discovered you.
Well, when we first spoke, you thanked me for saying inflation is theft, because you said you thought inflation had been like giving you.
I thought it was a natural law.
Yeah.
I just thought it happened.
And now to hear you, when I see your clips of you saying inflation is theft.
Yeah. Listen, man, this is why I sit across from you whenever I get the chance. So if inflation is stealing from everybody and only giving back to the rich, then, and you're willing to do it when a bank fails or whatever, what you're doing is creating a permanent caste system, because once you're at the top, you're building the network, you're building the policy to make sure that you can never fall.
Yeah.
Okay. So if I'm right that that is eventually going to hurt innovation, because you're not getting rid of the people that did dumb things, you're propping them up. Yeah. And so now the true innovator has undue hurdles that they have to overcome in order to actually aggregate the capital to innovate. Now the whole world begins to suffer from that. So I get why people that get to the top want to yank the ladder up, but nonetheless, it has all these horrific ramifications for a society as a whole.
100%. That's well said. So there's two things I want to talk about here. One is the genesis of gold. I think this will answer your question. How do we get central banks? How do they emerge from otherwise free market activities, right? So we mentioned that gold is physical, right? It doesn't work in a world running on telecommunications, meaning that you can only transmit promises to gold. It's very slow and expensive to send actual physical gold. So your physical final settlement lags your informational settlement trade communication, right? That produces a gap that creates systemic risk and whatnot. Now, it might be useful here to define money. One very useful definition of it is that money is a tool for moving purchasing power across space and time. And the purchasing power is simply what the money can buy you, the goods and services that amount of money can acquire in the marketplace. So gold, because it has a relatively inflexible supply, right? No one can counterfeit it. It does a really good job at holding purchasing power over time. It functions as a really good means of savings for people. However, as we just covered with the gap between gold and telecommunications, it does not move purchasing power across space very easily. It's very expensive. It's slow. It requires a lot of security. There's a lot of risk associated with it. So human beings, being the innovative, ingenious animals that we are, we innovated around this shortcoming of gold, right? Gold as money, really good at transmitting purchasing power across time, but not space. So what do? We put all the gold in one vault, and we trust this. Originally, these were called money warehouses. We trust this warehouse operator to issue warehouse receipts, right? Paper IOUs saying, hey, I've got this much gold on deposit with the warehouse. And then people could go and trade these paper receipts with one another as if they were as good as gold, because indeed they were for a long time. And then you have solved the space problem, right? All of a sudden gold can move really, really easily across space, or much more easily when it's in paper form, even more easily when it's abstracted into electronic form, right? Or digital form. These promises can move at the speed of light. And then so long as the warehouse operator is honest, you can always go and redeem the gold from the warehouse operator. Now, looking at the incentives of the warehouse operator, what do they face? They face the incentive to run what's called a fractional reserve. Okay, a full reserve warehouse is one in which all of the assets match all of the liabilities. So all of the paper certificates that are in circulation that say someone is owed gold is matched 1-to-1 with the gold actually in the warehouse. Right? That's a full reserve, non-fraudulent, legitimate money warehousing operation. What is a fractional reserve? A fractional reserve is when you issue more paper, more liabilities than you have assets to back. Once you do that, you're engaged in an insolvent, fraudulent practice, right?
Known as modern banking.
Yeah. Known as all of modern banking.
Yeah.
But the thing is, from the warehouse operator's perspective, that's pure profit. As long as everyone doesn't do a run on the bank, right? As long as not more than whatever the percentage of people is. If I'm running a 50% fractional reserve, then as long as 50% of my clients don't come and redeem at the same time, then we're good. I can loan these other paper certificates into existence as if they were as good as gold. The market will not detect this error unless there is a run on my bank. I can earn interest on this printed money out of thin air. And so goes the scheme, right? Now, this can sort of work if you have competition among money warehouses, right? So that the bad actors would get exposed and go out of business, and good actors with good reputations would be promoted and preserved. However, once the government intervenes in this game and says, you know what, we really like that money printing business you got there, that fractional reserve bank, and you know what, we're going to war, so we need a good spigot of money. I think we're going to take that fractional reserve bank and make that our own now. That's how you get this. You go from genesis of gold as money to paper certificates, warehouse receipts, augmenting the portability of gold to make it more useful for moving it across space, to creating this opportunity for warehouse operators to run a fractional reserve, to creating this source, this limitless profit center for governments to intervene and basically confiscate, right? And so that's the centralizing tendency that gives rise to the central bank. And, there's the Bank of Antwerp, Bank of England, like this is not an American thing, right? This has been going on for about 600 years, I think. And the American nation was founded largely in response and in rebellion to not only taxation, which we always hear about the Boston Tea Party, right? 2% tax, was it 2%, 4%?
Something like that.
Throw the tea in the harbor and, start killing redcoats kind of thing. Well, we were also rebelling and escaping from the Bank of England, which had tyrannized people for a really long time. The U.S. Constitution was written in a way so that we would not have a central bank. And indeed, we resisted one implementation of it. We had one for 25 years. The charter expired. And then we got the third attempt in 1913. Obviously read the book with the creature from Jekyll Island if you want the story on that. But that one was successful. And we've had a central bank now for 113 years or whatever it is. So that, I hope, answers, at least bridges from how we get to gold to central banking. And the other thing I wanted to say, I think
the only thing that I'll say that's left out of that, and I really am trying to bring my audience along in this, is if it were just profit motive, as you put it forward, you could sort of forgive it. It's a product and hey, isn't that wonderful? But either the people that do it are completely ignorant to the following, or they are sinister, and I put them in the sinister camp, is that when you issue additional paper,
Yeah.
that you are robbing the purchasing power of all the people that hold that paper.
Yeah.
And then in a modern banking sense, you reward anybody who holds assets.
Yeah.
Now, while anyone can hold assets, 10% of Americans hold 93% of the assets. And I'm going to guess even that 10% falls on a power scale. So now you're going to have some ridiculously small number of people that benefit from the fact that inflation is happening. But if people do not understand that second part, which is that as you inflate the currency, that you are enriching asset holders, and this is the flywheel that makes the rich richer and the poor poorer, then you have to begin to say, well, hold on a second. Are they completely naive to that effect? Or is that exactly why they're doing it? And I will put forward that that's exactly why they're doing it.
The shareholders.
The shareholders of the bank, asset holders are now incentivized. Like technically, I'm incentivized for inflation to happen because I own a ton of assets. So the more that the money supply is inflated, the wealthier I get. We'll be back to the show in a moment. But first, let's talk about why AI implementations fail so often. Everyone is rushing to adopt AI, but garbage in is always going to equal garbage out. Your AI is only as smart as your data. With NetSuite by Oracle, you can put AI to work today. NetSuite is the #1 AI cloud ERP, trusted by over 43,000 businesses. It is a unified suite that brings your financials, inventory, commerce, HR, and CRM into a single source of truth. That connected data is what makes your AI smarter. So it doesn't just guess, it actually knows. Right now, get our free business guide, Demystifying AI, at netsuite.com/theory. The guide is free to use at netsuite.com/theory. Now, let's get back to the show.
I would argue that in a zero-sum game perspective, yes, as the currency is depreciated, the assets that you own as a larger percentage of your portfolio will be bid up more than the currency will be depreciated, right? So people living on fixed income, paycheck to paycheck, pensioners, they're the ones getting robbed.
Yep.
And asset owners are getting rewarded. But here's the tricky thing is it all comes back to private property, right? That the existence of the central bank is premised on the violation of private property of savers through money printing, right? Savers put purchasing power in money. They expect it to be preserved or ideally grow across time. The central bank intervened. That's where we get gold, right? The market selects gold as money for that very reason. But then through state intervention, opportunism, whatever you want to call this, the profitability of coercion. And this is an important thing to disentangle, right? Because profitability, there's nothing wrong with profit in and of itself, right? That's a signal that we've solved the problem, basically, right? If I'm delivering a good or service into a market space, I'm solving consumer wants better, faster, cheaper than anyone else, right?
Yep.
That's basically what the profit says. That profit also induces competitors to enter, right? They want to come in and they want to get a piece of that margin, thereby competing prices down and quality up, right? Which all benefits the consumer. Profitability is great. It's a very important signaling mechanism. It's what coordinates economics, right? You know, prices, profits, all these things denominated in money. But when you talk about profiting from coercion, like the violation of private property, that you're profiting by stealing from someone else, what you are doing in aggregate is you are reducing total productivity. And this happens in two ways. One, if I steal something from you, that is time, effort, and energy I spent in the non-productive activity of confiscation, right? I didn't produce any good or service. I didn't produce a good, I produced a bad, right? A bad for you, namely, right? Like sure. I had a table, you stole my table. What happened? Now I got to go buy another table. Okay. So when you do that, my time, effort, and energy that could have otherwise been allocated towards some productive activity, building a business, building an asset, labor, whatever it is, was instead spent extracting from you, right? So that's one way in which the violation of private property reduces productivity. But now look at it from your perspective. If, say I stole 20% of your assets, right? And you acquired all of these assets through consensual work and trade, well, then you now have a 20% reduced incentive for any further production. You're like, well, the last time I produced 100% of the fruits of my labor, 20% of them got stolen. So my incentive to work has just gone down 20%. So it's this is the problem. This is why the integrity of private property, as Mises said, right? The history of civilization and the history of private property are inexorably linked, I think is how he put it. That's the whole purpose of civilization, is so that people can own things and specialize in things and trust that other people will own and specialize in things, and we can all trade and we can all enjoy the fruits of one another's highly specialized labor in this modern lap of luxury we call 2025. Despite all of the anti-market and anti-capitalistic forces that we're also dealing with, like nation states, like central banks, like politicians. So it's a matter of, do we reward productive, peaceful cooperation? That would be the profitability of consensual activity. Or do we reward non-productive, coercive, and violent activity? Which would be, that's how the central bank is profiting. That's how nation states are profiting, right? They engage in these activities for their own profit, but it comes at the expense of others. So this economics game is positive sum, right? It's win-win. Right? When you and I trade something consensually, we both do that because we believe that we will leave the trade better off than we were before. So both of us walk away with what's called psychic profit, right? We both at least think we're better off. We could be wrong, of course, but we did it consensually because we both believed it was in our best interest, right? So we've generated value on both sides of the trade. Once you violate that principle of consent, by definition, it's one person's gain at someone else's loss. Right? Your psychic profit, if I steal your table, your psychic profit has gone down. You've lost one table that you had before, whereas mine has gone up, right? I gained a table. But then we have all those issues related to productivity that I described. So the integrity of private property, this is, and it basically, some people get caught up in that it maybe is a bit abstract, but it's just a prohibition on killing and stealing and coercing. That's all it is. Right? This is biblical ethics encoded legally, right? Encoded as a social institution we call private property. But this is the most important social institution in the world. This is what coheres civilization. This is what allows us, Hoppe makes the point that it's even presupposed when we have a conversation. You are presupposing by listening to me right now that I have freedom of choice, that I control myself, that I have something that you could possibly learn. And then if you didn't do that, and you just, thought there's nothing you could learn from me and you know everything, well, then all of a sudden we're not having a conversation, right? It's something more like, I don't know what it is at that point, but it's not a conversation. So to have this free exchange, we have to presuppose that each of us individually owns ourselves.
Yes, all of that makes sense. The thing that I want to drag into the light for people is that if you let this get philosophical, you're going to miss that it's nefarious. And the reason that I brought all of this up in the context of Mamdani is that I think that there is a very bad thing that is happening that has very noble cause and effect. And people's failure to accurately understand the cause and effect is what makes them elect the person who is absolutely the worst for them.
Yeah.
So once you understand that the government can steal your money, if there's a central bank, the government can steal your money by, as you said, counterfeit money print. It will come under a much nicer name, but it's counterfeiting your money. When the money is counterfeited, then your dollar no longer buys a dollar's worth of stuff. It buys 90 cents, 80 cents, 70 cents, on down to nothing.
Yeah.
And then people get into this where, I can't make ends meet. They start feeling very anxious. That anxiety needs to get transmuted into something that feels far more powerful. That tends to be anger. You go into a populist moment. And great irony of ironies is you end up voting for the guy that is really just trying to get elected. So he promises you free stuff. Yep. The second they promise you free stuff, what they are promising you is that they're going to money print. As we just covered, they're going to counterfeit money, take from you, but in a way that you may think you're psychically profiting, but in reality, you're being stolen from. That's and the inability to track That
Yes.
is how we end up voting for these problems. Now, these problems being very clearly socialism. Now, one thing that I want you to explain why does socialism so consistently, so necessarily become murderous?
Well, let's start with some definitions. I think I've shared this with you before, but I really like the spectrum. Again, this is inspired by the libertarian philosopher Hoppe. And on one end, he has capitalism, which is the universal respect for private property and the trade of private property via contract, right? Via consent, basically. So not only can we own things, but we can also trade things consensually, right? The rule of law, legal coercion exists only to preserve that, right? That's an ideal capitalistic world. The opposite end of this spectrum would be communism or Marxism, right? Which, as Marx himself said, could be summed up in one sentence: the abolition of private property. No one owns anything. The state owns everything and tells you what to do, right? That's the opposite of capitalism. Socialism is the gradient between. It's just you tell me what percentage your effective tax rate is, and I tell you what percentage socialist your society is and what percentage a slave you are, right? Again, if 100% of the fruits of your labor are being stolen, that's the definition of a slave, right? You keep nothing of your work. And if you keep 100% of the fruits of your labor, then you are sovereign, right? You're not subject to anyone, right? You are a fully actualized sovereign agent, basically. And so socialism is the spectrum between. There's a lot of different flavors of it, but again, if we're looking at it through the lens of private property, it's just at what rate are we violating private property? And Hoppe takes this further and says that, okay, the rate at which you're violating private property is the same rate at which you are incentivizing those non-productive, coercive, violent activities, right? If it's profitable to go and get elected to public office and benefit from tax dollars and printed money, no matter what promises you have to make people, there are individuals that will take that opportunity, right? As we're seeing in New York City today. But if those opportunities don't exist and we're just rewarding people profits from consensual activity, right? In this domain of pure capitalism over here, then we're only rewarding prudence and trade and pragmatism and problem solving, right? We're not rewarding problem making, right? You almost call coercion problem making, right? Like it is making a problem by definition for the person being coerced. Otherwise, it wouldn't be coercion. Again, if it was consensual, they're at least leaving. They may have real problems to deal with because their psychic evaluation of the situation wasn't right, but at least their psychic profit, their belief is that they are better off after the trade. But once that principle of consent is violated, you start sliding from the world of ideal capitalism into the spectrum of socialism, and then it typically degenerates ultimately into communism or Marxism. So it is this like chink in the integrity of civilization, I think, where the darker side of human nature can fester. And I think that's why socialism has emerged in that,
But why does it become murderous? It becomes murder. I think it has a very clear mechanism.
Okay. I think it becomes murderous, again, the way Booth put it is like currency wars lead to trade wars, lead to real wars. Once you're earning profits from coercing someone, stealing from them, right? That instigates backlash. The other side of that trade is going to seek retribution of some kind, right? So you're sparking a mimetic cycle.
So basically, people are going to be pissed.
Yeah,
you're taking their stuff,
and they're going to strike back, right? And then you get into these like blood feud situations where like, okay, whether it's social revolution, whether it's basic petty crime, whatever it is, people get desperate and they start to act in more of a zero-sum game manner, right? My win necessarily comes at your loss, right? That's the only way for me to succeed. And the less so from the positive sum mentality of, hey, let's trade, right? Let's have free trade. Let's act according to the same rules. Let's all play pretend, that we each actually have the exclusive rights to the things of value we create. Right? That's kind of the LARPing that we're doing with private property, but it's very useful LARPing because when we do that, we play that game of pretend, we get a lot of peace and productivity. When we start to break the rules of that game or twist the rules of that game or violate the rules of that game, as politicians do, specifically socialist politicians, that's when it starts to degenerate. And I think you start moving along that spectrum straight towards communism. And what we know what communism does, right? You want to talk about murderous. What are the numbers? How many people did Stalin murder? 60, 100 million?
Stalin is tougher to pin down, but there is a political scientist, I'm forgetting his name right now, but he clocked the number at over 200 million dead in the 20th century alone due to government policy.
There you go. Democide, I think he called it.
Yes. Yeah. So the thing, we might be saying the exact same thing, but in different ways. Where this breaks for me is because it doesn't work, people start raising their hand and saying it doesn't work.
Yeah.
But for me, socialism is born of a very simple idea. I know better than you.
Yeah.
And so when you look at the marketplace and you say rents in New York are too high, you never stop to think too high by what metric? What do you mean? You just mean that some people can't afford it. That's the nature of things. So when somebody goes, I know better, then they try to control the market from the top down and things start breaking. Like for instance, if you tell a landlord you can only charge X amount of rent, but it costs more than that to maintain the building, you're just wrong. Sure. You don't understand capitalism. You don't understand incentives, all of that. Yeah. And so that person raises their hand and says, this doesn't make any sense. And then because they are right, you ultimately have to shut them up. And once you understand the only way to shut somebody up is to let them vote, and so you're at risk of being voted out of office, or you force them to be quiet, and now the guns have come out, and hence the murder. Yeah. It really is that simple. Like, I don't want people to lose sight of like, this becomes a problem because the plumbers aren't going to work for free to repair the building. When you stain the carpet or get mold, the people that remove that stuff won't work for free. Yeah. So you either have to force them to work for free, which I think everybody would agree is a terrible idea. Slavery. But in socialism, you have to, because that's the only way that you can guarantee those outcomes. And so this is why I'm trying to I don't want all this stuff to be super heady. I want people to understand, listen, you won't work for free. Well, and if you won't work for free, then things can't be given to you for free, because somebody at some point has to work for free for that to happen. And then, of course, people are going to say, well, Tom, just tax the rich. You could literally tax not just their income, but their wealth. And nobody understands wealth. Wealth is fiction. But even if you could tax their fictional wealth, you would only get 2 years runway.
I don't think it's that much.
All gone. It's all gone.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, this is so basic. This is really simple. And if people could track that you won't work for free, no one will work for free. And if people don't work for free, nobody can get anything for free. And that over and over and over, every time this is tried, you end up having to kill a whole lot of people, because eventually somebody goes, hey, Mao, planting the same crops at the same time across a country the size of America, it doesn't work. They're not going to grow. And then everybody starves to death. And so you got to shoot a bunch of them. It's really that basic.
I think we're in deep agreement, honestly. I may be saying it in a much more heady way, and you're saying it in a much more accessible way. So God bless you for that. But
I'm just trying to get I think America is racing towards a problem, and they're being stolen from. So they get, Mamdani is right. There is a huge problem.
All the Marxists are right.
And the question becomes why is there a huge problem?
Yes, and what to do about it.
Correct. Yeah. And so if you can't map out, I'm being stolen from, if I could just get everybody to understand two things. Thing number one, if your government is deficit spending, they're stealing from you. Thing two, if the government is inflating the money supply, they're stealing from you. If I could get them there, that's
the only way they can deficit spend.
Right.
Yeah.
So if I could get people to look at, wait, you want to make this thing free, that means that you're allocating governmental budget towards that. What are you cutting? Because we're already deficit spending. So if you're adding more to the deficit, well, then that's going to create more and more problems. But it's proving very difficult to get people to follow said cause and effect.
I can totally relate to that as someone who's been beating the what is money drum for, I don't know, close to a decade now.
Yeah.
It can feel a little frustrating in that you're trying to liberate victims from their victimage. But
so are you a Bitcoin is life raft guy?
Well, private property is what we're going for, right? The ability to own things that are independent of the opinions of other people. And I think to that end, Bitcoin is the strongest form of private property we've ever had. First of all, money by definition can be used to obtain any good or service in the marketplace, right? So in a way, it's kind of like a meta private property, right? It gives you access to obtain anything the marketplace can bear. Any property that anyone has, well, it's mostly for sale, not all of it, but mostly anything people can create of value, it's available through money. The printing of money is the violation of private property of savers, right? People are holding, and here's a good way to think about this. When you go to work, for instance, and you trade your time for money, right? You are expending your labor producing a good or service for someone else. You're solving someone else's problems and you're paid in money, right? You can then take that money back into the marketplace and you can give it to someone else so they'll solve your problems, right? They'll sell you a pair of shoes or they'll fix your sink or they'll sell you a car, whatever the thing is. This trading of favors, that's another good definition of money, the medium through which we trade favors, basically. When you do that, right? So let's say you just go to work and you provide services or you render labor to provide goods or services, and then you are paid in money, and then you hold the money, you save it. What's happened in aggregate to the world? You've increased the productive output of the species, right? By rendering your labor to produce goods and services. You've been paid in money, but you haven't spent it yet. You're just holding it, right? It's just potential goods and services in the future. So you've added to the productive output of the planet, but you haven't yet subtracted from it. So this is like when it's extremely moral. It is extremely moral to save. Hoppe would point out here too, this starts the process of lowering time preference, which is the rate at which we prefer present satisfaction to later satisfaction. And he later says that civilization itself is the externalization of our individual time preference. So the lower our total average time preference becomes, the more civilized we become. So money is this meta private property, lets you obtain anything the marketplace can bear. Money is this medium through which we trade favors, and to earn money is to do something that's very moral and useful. Now, if that money you're saving in is now being counterfeited by the central bank, well, then the purchasing power, right, the moral act, the reward for the moral act you did of going to work is now being depreciated. Someone who's benefiting from that money printing is stealing from you. They're stealing your labor. They're stealing your time, your energy, your effort. Bitcoin is money that cannot be printed, right? It's fixed supply money. So it is invulnerable to the violation of private property through currency expansion. And that's very important, right? That's
is the goal though just to get people off of government-controlled money?
Well, that obviates the need for central banking entirely. So if we go back to our first definition of money as an instrument for moving purchasing power across space and time. Bitcoin is like the internet and gold had a baby, right? I probably said this to you before, but gold was really good at moving purchasing power across time because it has the inflexible supply, but not space because it's physical. So we augmented gold to have gold-backed currencies, which are really good for moving purchasing power across space because it's just paper or electronic, but not across time because it introduced the warehouse incentive problem where there's an incentive to run a fractional reserve, which leads to inflation of the currency and ultimately hyperinflation. Bitcoin threads the needle. Bitcoin is a pure digital asset with a fixed supply. It's the only fixed supply asset in the history of the human race, the only one there will ever be, so far as I can tell. So it perfects the preservation or transmission of purchasing power across time. Also, because it's purely digital, it's just information, you can move it at the speed of light. Right?
Why do you think it's the only one that will ever be though? Like it's the easiest thing in the world to replicate.
Because of game theory. We have 40 million replications of Bitcoin right now, right?
You're just saying it's the one that got adopted.
I'm saying that absolute scarcity, a fixed supply money, can only be discovered once. I think it's in this way. You have to compare it to something like the number zero, or people also compare it to the wheel, right? Like, are we going to invent something that disrupts the wheel? Like, no, the wheel is very fundamental.
Yeah, but the wheel's a concept. I can make a...
So is Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a concept made real.
Yes, I don't know if this is where we want to take the conversation, but just because I know people are going to hammer in the comments on that. This is adoption. I'm going to channel Peter Schiff right now. Bitcoin has no intrinsic value whatsoever. At least gold can be turned into a watch.
I'm sorry. If we're going to do a show on economics, let's not use the term intrinsic value. Peter Schiff is the worst for that. All value is subjective, right? It does not exist. It does not inhere in things, to quote Mises.
Agreed,
it exists
but that means
in how
that
we respond to the conditions of our
Bitcoin
environment.
can be replicated, has been replicated a gazillion times. It's just a question of whether people adopt it or not. The reason I'm asking about Bitcoin though is I'm trying to make, like, I have two options before me. Path number one, move to Singapore and just be a rich guy.
We were talking about that this morning, Singapore.
Yeah. Path number two, stay engaged in America and try to get people to understand why they got raked over the coals. For now, it's path number two. I really want people to understand this. I've always had beef with people that are just like, Bitcoin's a life raft. The reason I have beef with it is, while it's true and it has all these fancy properties, the reality is people just need to get the hell away from anything that can be inflated. And so right now, while Bitcoin is my single biggest investment, Bitcoin is also moving more like a tech stock than it is like gold. So people need to, I would say, be very honest about the state of Bitcoin currently, and make sure they understand the cause and effect of all this stuff so they can figure out how to eject out of just the everyday fiat currency that they are currently trapped in. I want them to know where to put their money, how to invest, and how to vote. Like, those are my, like, just super small breadbasket of things. But unfortunately, no matter how much I try to simplify, even like the slightest amount of nuance, I know I lose people. So yeah, I'm curious as to, like, you're going to be fine because you understand the nature of money. But like, if you had to make this accessible and understandable to somebody who is going to get lost very fast, is Bitcoin the punchline because it can't be inflated and it's not government controlled, or is there something else?
Okay, I'm going to try to make it as accessible as I can.
Yeah,
I do try to make it accessible. Let me try to speak like a caveman. Money printing bad.
Please. Okay.
Money printing bad. Right?
Love it.
Steal from you. Money printing steal from you. Okay. Money that cannot be printed, therefore good. Really good, right? Really good thing. It protects your purchasing power, which is your ability to survive in the real world, right? The work that you expend to gain resources, to improve your own and your family's survivability. Oh, sorry, I'm getting fancy words again. That improves your chances for survival. That seems reasonable enough. That is depreciated through money printing, okay? So Bitcoin is money that you cannot print. Okay, so money printing bad, money you cannot print good, Bitcoin good, okay? Further, back to this idea of private property, which is ultimately about the integrity of the relationship between the owner and his assets, right?
You were doing so well. And now we're back to integrity of ownership.
I'll try to simplify it.
Yeah, so can't be printed, we got that part.
Okay, let's use this. Marriage.
Government control's not a part of this?
Marriage. What is marriage?
A union between two people.
Right. And there's exclusivity, right? Most marriages.
Not always.
But consensual, like even if there's not exclusivity, you would consent to let someone else sleep with your partner. You wouldn't agree to a marriage and then she can sleep behind my back whenever she wants, unless you've consented to like a don't ask, don't tell, or whatever the thing is. Okay. Private property is pretty similar. It's like you, the creator or buyer of that asset, own it. You own it. You decide what to do with it. You can exclude people from its use. You can include people for its use, renting it out, whatever. You can sell it. You can destroy it. You can eat it, whatever it is, right? Like you decide. So it's a exclusive relationship like marriage between husband and wife, between owner and asset. I hope that helps. The reason Bitcoin excels here is because to physically custody or to have Bitcoin in your possession is to just have a private key, is to just keep a secret. And so the ability, it was once put to me, this was a funny guy sharing a story about a Middle Eastern gentleman that said what he really loved about Bitcoin was that he could put $100 million of Bitcoin on a hard drive and stick it up his butt and get on an airplane and go anywhere in the world if things ever got bad. Someone really needs to tell that guy about a brain wallet, by the way, because you don't have to do that sticking up the butt part. You could just memorize 12 words. And then he went on to say, you cannot put $100 million of gold up your ass.
It would be tough.
Right? So like, tough. Okay, I hope this
I'd
is
like to think
accessible
I could give it a
people.
shot. But,
I hope this is accessible for people. It's like, if you want to be able to control your means of survival, which is purchasing power in economics parlance, with the most assurance that no one else will be able to override you, right? They'll be able to take it or whatever, then Bitcoin is that thing, right? You can own an asset that is technically unseizable. We could get into the multi-key custody and whatnot where like, yeah, sure, a brain wallet, you can be tortured and someone can force you to give up your 12 words. But if you put your Bitcoin in a multi-key and all of a sudden those 12 words are, let's say, chopped into 5 pieces and you need 3 or 5 of those pieces to unlock it, well, this is the highest security custody schema we have. This is what we use for nuclear launch codes, right? If you've ever seen a movie where the guys have to like put in the keys at the same time, turn them in the same sequence, and then they can access the nukes or whatever, that's a multi-key setup. You can do that with Bitcoin. So in terms of money printing bad, money you cannot print good, and then assets that cannot be stolen easily, also good, because that lets you control your livelihood, your means of survival. Bitcoin excels everything in both of those respects. And now we could go into the Bitcoin versus shitcoin thing, like, oh, well, why, if Bitcoin is just open source software, why doesn't everyone just copy it and make 1 million different copies of it? And, and then it's diluted, then it's hyperinflated. Well, first of all, we have 17 years of market test. Okay, that's already been happening. We have like 40 million shitcoins in existence. Bitcoin's outperformed all of them for 17 years straight. It's the fastest growing asset in human history. And to try to make it accessible, the metaphor I've heard used is that you are free to fork the rules of chess, right? Chess is open source software too, right? It's just rules, the game, we sit down and we play it. You can change those rules all you want, whatever way you want, right? People do it. There's 3D chess, there's all kinds of stuff. But chess isn't going anywhere, right? Like as a game, it's a shelling point. People have coalesced on it as an existing thing. So even though, as you said earlier, it's a concept, like these things really matter. The essay I wrote was the number 0 in Bitcoin, right? Like the number 0, if you could imagine something disrupting that or disrupting the wheel, as we said earlier, like this is how you need to think about Bitcoin. It's that type of innovation. It is something so fundamental, something that like is so mind-blowing and hard to comprehend. That's why we're all the 6 blind guys, describing the elephant, that we struggle with different metaphors, the internet of money, digital gold, internet and gold had a baby, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so, but if I'm trying to make it, I don't know if this is accessible, but elemental, it is the perfection or optimization, at least, of private property, which then leads to the optimization of price discovery. And I think also leads to the optimization of political freedom.
Why does it move like a tech stock and not like gold?
Well, it's gone from 0 to $2 trillion in its first 17 years of existence, which makes it the fastest growing asset in human history. Price volatility is inverse to market cap. So the smaller an asset is, the more volatile its price will be, right? You could think of this as like a little boat on big waves versus a big boat on those same waves, right? There's more the little boat will experience relatively more volatility as those waves move, whereas the big boat will be more stable, right?
So you're saying it's not big enough yet to match gold?
As it grows, its volatility goes down. Mm-hmm. This is already also market proven, and it's not just Bitcoin, it's provable for a number of assets. You could look at Amazon, right? Amazon declined like 94% after the 2001 tech bubble. Amazon went down 94%, and then it's grown like 40,000% since, right? Okay, so the year, I think it was like 18 months, that the Amazon price declined that much. It was like, its annualized volatility was, let's say 80%, something like that, right? Okay, what is Amazon? But it was a whatever, $5 trillion asset then, not 5 trillion, $5 billion asset then. Now it's a multi-trillion-dollar asset. What's its volatility today, right? I guarantee you it's less than whatever it was then. If it was 80 vol then, it's probably a 30 or 40 vol now, right? The volatility has declined as Amazon stock has grown. Same is true for Bitcoin, right? So gold is what is it now? $20 trillion asset, 22?
Sure, with the total market cap, but it's soared in the last year. Soared.
Yeah, soared less than Bitcoin, but still soared.
But what I'm getting at is there's a reason, very open to what that is, but there's a reason that gold functions the way that it does, which is in times of inflation, people are going to flee to gold. In times of government uncertainty, whether they'll pay back their debts, people are going to flee to gold. They don't expect a big return. They just expect safety.
That's right.
Bitcoin does not function like that yet. Maybe it will one day, or maybe it's something that people think of in a totally different way. And I'm just like, I have a take. I think I know why it is, but I could be wrong. And so I'm just curious what you think the answer is. So far, it sounds like you're saying it's just new. And so as it grows, it will probably function more like gold in that its volatility will go down because its just raw size will go up. But I was just curious if you think that people mentally map it differently now, if they see it as a sexy thing that is sexy precisely because it's high volatility. And so they want in, they're going to ride that volatility. They're going to day trade against it. They're going to do all the fun things that people wouldn't do with gold. And then if that's correct, if you think that it's inevitable that changes, but it remains a gold-like thing, or if it stops being the cool new thing and we move on.
Yeah, well, people buy assets for all kinds of reasons, right? Like how people arrive at their conclusions is often beyond me. But this is where I think it's very important to be a fundamental investor, or at least take a perspective on fundamentals of the asset. One of the most important answers to the question, what is money, in my opinion, for me, at least in my journey, was when I arrived at the properties of money. Like, what are the actual, to use language, this was language popularized in the 1960s by a guy named Gibson. He wrote a book, An Ecological Approach to Visual Perception. And he talked about affordances, that organisms actually perceive affordances, which are opportunities for real action, right? And it's kind of an interesting thing. He makes the point often that they're neither subjective nor objective. It's about a fitness relationship between the subject and the objective world. And so we could either call these the properties of money, or we could call these the affordances of money, right? Obviously, there's a monetary metaphor built into that word, affordance. And people narrow this down to a different number of categories, but I've always narrowed it down to 5. And it's divisibility, durability, recognizability, portability, scarcity, right? So when we evaluate gold through that lens, it's very divisible, it's very durable, it's not very portable. As we said earlier, that's why we needed currency, right? It's somewhat recognizable. We have to do tests on it. That's where we get the term sound money. You would drop a coin from a certain height and it would make a certain sound, and that was a heuristic for its authenticity. And then importantly, gold is relatively scarce. It has an inflexible supply, which lets it hold purchasing power across time well. Okay, so as a money, it excels in all of the affordances or properties of money except portability. That's why we needed currency, right? And then we get into the whole money warehousing thing and the fractional reserve banking scam. Now evaluate Bitcoin through that same lens. It has basically perfected all the properties of money. It's infinitely divisible. It's divisible right now to 100 million subunits called sats. You can increase that divisibility via a soft fork, which is a backwards compatible software upgrade. So it's like a non-contentious change, basically. So effectively it has infinite divisibility. Its durability is also infinite. This is where it's good to think, as we talked earlier, about the idea of a concept versus the thing. The example I often like to cite is the Bible, right? You could go out into the world and go on a Bible burning campaign, but no amount of Bible burning would ever destroy the Bible. Like the concept of the Bible has so thoroughly permeated consciousness that it will exist forever. Bitcoin runs on the same principles, right? It's like it's everywhere and nowhere, as Bitcoiners say. So every node has the full history of what Bitcoin is. So the durability of it is effectively perfected. Portability, because it's just information, it can move at the speed of light, can't get much faster than that. So portability is perfected. Recognizability, which again is the ability to authenticate or verify the money is what it says it is, right? This is a real gold coin, not a piece of lead plated with gold, right? Like you have to verify what it is. You can audit the total Bitcoin supply. In fact, this is what Bitcoin does. Every node on the network is auditing the work of every other node, mining or otherwise, every 10 minutes. So the entire system is like 100% verification and 0% trust, right? You don't need to trust, no trust me bros, if you will. And then finally, Bitcoin is the only fixed supply asset in the history of the human race. So it's perfected that relatively inflexible supply that gold had that gave it a really good ability to store purchasing power into the future. Bitcoin has perfected, right? We have a fixed supply asset so that your purchasing power will not be debased at all. Not 2%, not 5%, like nothing, zero, right? When you look at Bitcoin on a fully diluted basis, there's only 21 million that can ever possibly exist. The number can only go down from there. Right, so that's why I think Bitcoin is like, you're asking me what it is. Today, it trades as a very significant risk on asset, right? Which means people are speculating on it, people are leveraging, whatever, right? It's high volatility, right? So it tends to be in the risk portion of people's portfolio. But its fundamentals, what it is, it's digital gold. The internet and gold had a baby. You mentioned gold is the ultimate risk-off asset right now in the current world, right? Bitcoin's better than gold fundamentally. On those same properties that make gold a good risk-off asset, make Bitcoin the perfect risk-off asset. So we are at a unique time in history where the world perceives Bitcoin as the ultimate risk-on asset, speculative, volatile, dangerous, whatever. And the reality is it is the safest, most perfect form of private property available to the human race. And so that recognition will dawn on people through the market process. And it's just up to you to, study Bitcoin, do the work, and decide for yourself. But that's my view.
Okay. So we've got this perfect risk off asset. Plus we have gold, which is withstood the test of time. And we have a currency in the US dollar that is inflating like crazy. We're at 122% debt to GDP and rising. Mm-hmm. There's a magic line at 130% where essentially you're guaranteed to be in open conflict within your country, often revolution, often turning the tables over, defaulting on the debt, just absolute economic catastrophe. We're racing towards that. So given that we have a problem that I'll peg, I'm not trying to put these words in your mouth, but I'll say somewhere between 8 to 10 years, you cross that line.
Of the 130%?
Yep. Okay. And I hope people can already feel that we're already heading towards the open violence. It's already begun. And so it's not like a binary switch that we get there and then it clicks over. It will just get worse from here. And we have an exit ramp, whether that's gold, whether that is Bitcoin. So how do you see this playing out? Do you think I'm crazy and that it's never going to end? Party's just going to keep going. We're all going to be fine. Or is it going to be people start taking that off ramp, which then further craters the dollar because there's no appetite for treasuries, which not to lose anybody new to the conversation, but just know if there's no appetite for treasuries, your country goes broke. The appetite for the treasuries is entirely based on confidence and
money printing.
Yes, money printing is what will drive the lack of confidence. So,
I'm saying money printing is used to buy those treasuries too. So it increases. This is why it's self-defeating.
Breaks the confidence.
Exactly. This is why fiat currency is an oxymoron. Okay, another definition of money: the final extinguisher of debt. What is fiat currency? A debt-based money. It doesn't make any sense. The dollar you have in your pocket or your bank account you think is an asset, but in fact there's a liability attached to it. So in accounting, we have an equation: assets equals liabilities plus equity, right? If I own a piece of gold or I own Bitcoin, I have an asset that's 0% liability because it's a bearer asset and 100% equity. I have 100% equity in the asset, so all the value is mine, right? You would think the same thing about a dollar. Oh, if I have a dollar, it's a bearer asset, it's mine. But what you don't see is that invisible liability sewn into it, right? You could stuff all the dollars under your mattress you want. That doesn't stop the Fed from counterfeiting it by the trillion and stealing your purchasing power. So you can't even own it, right? Because it's not property. It's not private and it's not property, right? Just like they joke about the Federal Reserve. It's as federal as Federal Express and it has no reserves, right? The entire thing is a fucking scam. And I'm sorry, to put it that way, but I share your frustration. It's like, I've done my best to point to the books. I try to make it as accessible as possible. I know I may have tendency to talk a little bit heady sometimes, but
do you see us as on a timeline, or do you think that this is sustainable?
Of course. I think statism always degenerates. And I just don't, what is the opening line to that Police song? It says,
don't stand so close.
Have no faith in Constitution. There is no bloody revolution. Fuck, I'm forgetting the words now. But the point is this, you can't socially organize people with violence and coercion. It's not sustainable. It's not sustainable, right? If you're just going to scare people and steal from them, they're going to look to get out of that system and betray you and backstab you every chance they get, or overthrow you, right? And if they overthrow you, then they install their new coercive government and the process repeats. What did you say earlier? The two things you wanted people to understand, something like money printing bad, right?
Yep. So far, so good.
What was the second one?
That your government, if it's deficit spending, they are stealing from you.
They're stealing from you, which all deficit spending is funded by money printing. So
Correct.
Those go hand in hand. I would hope you would add a third, or consider adding a third. And that is taxation is theft. Taxation is theft. The whole thing's stealing from you. The inflation steals from you. The deficit spending steals from you. And the taxation steals from you. So what we need to do as a species is evolve past the idea of legalized theft as a necessary ingredient of social coherence, because it introduces the opposite. It's just like fiat currency, the debt-based money. The idea that we're going to coerce ourselves into unity doesn't work. What do we need? We need really strong private property, really good incentives, and diminished profitability of coercion and violence. And I think that's where Bitcoin, that's probably one of the deepest perspectives to take on it. That idea that, okay, it can't be printed as money, so that defunds the war machine. It's also really hard to steal as money.
And you're saying it defunds a war machine because we can't possibly tax enough to pay for it.
So you could check my numbers on this. I think it was $8 trillion the United States spent on the war on terror. My numbers might be wrong, but the point will stand. Say it was $8 trillion we spent on the quote unquote war on terror, giant air quotes here, because it's really just genocide and imperialism. U.S. spent $8 trillion in a 20-year period. The Federal Reserve printed like $8.5 trillion during that same time period. Okay? Whatever it worked out to be, it was something like the cost of that was $80,000 per U.S. household. So had the money printer not been available to fund the war on terror, every American household would have been sent a bill for $80,000 saying, hey, here, pay your fair share of us.
Here's the
blowing
bad
people
news.
up.
They were sent a bill for $80,000. They just don't realize it.
That's right. Exactly. So the plausible deniability, by elimination of the money printer, you're eliminating the plausible deniability of the state, where they can't print the money to go to war, so they have to send you that bill. And then people resist, right? It's become visible. It's become legible. People see it.
All right. So if those are the things that we need,
and then finally, because Bitcoin's hard to steal, like you go back to the example of like when Germany invaded Poland, right? Once they've conquered Poland, what do? They go to the central bank and they seize the gold, right? Why? Because war is expensive and I need the money to go and do more warring. Okay. If that were magically on a Bitcoin standard and Poland had their Bitcoin in a multi-key, well, Germany would have conquered this country and then it got no payoff. So the incentives to violence and coercion, even at scale, go down by virtue of the existence of Bitcoin. This is what I think changes and tilts us toward like an evolution in human consciousness, even perhaps. Maybe we don't understand how responsive to incentives we really are. And that by virtue of changing the incentive landscape so fundamentally.
So wait, are you saying that as we move towards Bitcoin, we are less likely to go to war?
Yes, I think war is less possible. It has to be paid for with explicit taxation, which people are more likely to resist. Mm-hmm. I also think that should war ensue, triumphant countries will not be able to seize the assets of losing countries so easily in a Bitcoinized world. Bitcoin is very difficult / impossible to steal if custodied properly. So it's like we have changed the fundamental grammar of the entire game of being human. And so now we have to reevaluate all of our social institutions layer by layer and reimagine it in a Bitcoinized world. Of course, it's not just Bitcoin, right? We also have the internet, encrypted communications, decentralized internet provisioning, energy production, flying car. Like there's a lot of things that are giving more power to the individual and reducing the power of collectives over the individual.
I know you don't pay a lot of attention to politics, but are you watching closely enough to be encouraged or discouraged by the change in policy around crypto?
I don't give a shit. TikTok next block. Bitcoiners do not I'm sorry. I don't want to generalize. I, as a Bitcoiner, do not give a flying fuck about what regulations you're passing or not passing or doing. It doesn't matter. It's like you can also ban gravity, but gravity's not going anywhere. Okay, so there are things that government cannot do anything about, and Bitcoin is one of them.
So interesting. This might be where I start. It's so funny because I'm so pro Bitcoin, but I think that that mentality coming off the Bitcoin community is so detached from reality that I'm always very confused. So the world has a structure. There's nowhere that you're going to go that you're going to escape the fact that there are governments. I know that Balaji believes strongly in the network state. Hey, Lord knows, if I'm wrong, I'll be the first to congratulate Balaji. But the fact is that if Hitler rolled up and you've got Bitcoin, Hitler's going to smash 30,000 of you in the head, and the 30,001 person is going to hand over their keys. If you kill enough people in the country, you just take everything else. Like you money print, you do whatever. And violence is the ultimate trump card. And I've always had a very jarring ring when people are like, they can't confiscate your Bitcoin. It's like, yes, they can. Maybe they can't confiscate yours. Like maybe you really will take the bullet to the head and just be like, I'd rather be dead than you get my money. But the vast majority of people will not be like that. They'll try to lie and all of that. But the real thing, and I think this is maybe the crusade I'm on, I need people to understand the nature of the government itself. And the nature of that government is that it wears a mask. And we are finally living in the age of rapid information. There is such volume and velocity of information that we can finally see things for what they are. And maybe you're helping me map why this moment for me is so bothersome. As I see people embrace socialism and vote for a candidate who's very charismatic and very smiley, but at the same time, he represents a sinister ideology. And I need people to understand it's not sinister because I feel some kind of way about it. It's sinister because I believe that starving people to death is evil. I believe that taking the things that are theirs is evil. And it's knowable that it will have to do that because it isn't efficient at coming up with pricing, right? You already said that at the beginning, that, hey, something as mundane as like, how much should this cost? Is going to be born of decentralizing that answer, that humans that trust themselves too much become a murderous menace to the world. And so when I hear the WEF get together and say, you're going to own nothing and you're going to be happy, or God bless Bill Gates, even if he has good intentions, just trying to like solve all these problems by himself rather than letting things be more of these bottom-up solutions and creating incentive structures for a whole bunch of people to compete to like become that. That's where I'm just like, oh man, this is people that trust themselves too much. They will end up saying something akin to, you got to break a few eggs to make an omelet, which means I've got to kill, a couple 100 million of you. Is it really that big of a deal? Like it's so wild. And so getting people to understand that the founding fathers really had it right. They were super paranoid about themselves, that they understood that we tend towards tyranny, that whatever system you have has got to plan for the fact that it tends toward tyranny. Yeah. There was a reason that Jefferson said that you have to like wash in the blood of tyrants and patriots alike or something like that. Like basically
the tree of liberty must occasionally be refreshed with the blood of tyrants and patriots.
Yes. So it's like, yeah, kids, like they're trying to point out this is the nature of the system. Yeah. And so living at this part where I've gotten to taste both like, hey, when this is going well and people are disciplined and we're not deficit spending and we actually have a surplus, like those times are pretty rad. And so, but getting people to understand this is all downstream of culture and what you teach your kids matters tremendously. Yeah. And we are not teaching people a story about hard work, discipline, that you should want to save your money, work in the summer to be ready for the winter. Like there's just like old school fable type morals that we've got to get across to people. Otherwise things get very, very bad, very fast. And it is wild. And I really appreciate the people in my community that remind me I'm not screaming into the void. There are some people that are listening, but it is, this all started for me in COVID when I realized, oh, these people that used to work for me, they grew up in the hood. They're all going to get eaten alive. They're all going to lose their jobs. It's going to suck. Let me make some financial content for them about how to save their money. And then I realized I actually don't, like I'm good at making money. I'm not good at investing money. So, damn, I got to kind of learn about this. And then you start pulling all these threads and all of a sudden you're like, wait, the government's stealing all your money. It has been such a wild
it's a Bitcoin rabbit hole
awakening. It's partly Bitcoin. And whenever somebody throws a flag and is like, well, Bitcoin just solves all your problems. I'm like, you understand the vast majority of people just are never going to understand it. So it's like the vast majority of people, they do not want a high volatile asset. It's too scary. It's too confusing. I think governments have a moral obligation to allow people to do that. I think that the current administration's change on crypto and being pro crypto is the right answer. It is good things from an administration that is still stealing your money. And so it's a bit of a mixed bag.
Well, it's a lot. I think you're doing good work. And I think I largely agree with you.
Zoom in on the part that you don't agree with.
I mean, I view this as the invention of the printing press under the reign of the medieval church type of innovation, right? So
where we go to 30 years of war, kill millions across Europe?
Possibly. But it calls into...
Do you really think that?
Well, I think that the relevance of the dominant institutional paradigm today, which is the nation state, is going to be seriously called into question by the emergence of Bitcoin in the same way the dominant institutional paradigm of the medieval church was called into question with the invention of the printing press.
And what replaces it? Network states or something else?
Well, a more peaceful, productive, and innovative world. Now, what does that actually look like from a political/social organization standpoint? I don't know, right? I think what we need is more experimentation. So we have 200 nation states today. You know, I'd like to see us move towards a world with like 20,000 free city states. You know, and you could run experiments and if you want to be a socialist, great. There's Socialistville over here. Go live there, do your own thing. You know, when it fails, then it'll become Capitalistville. You know, that type of paradigm. So it's Bitcoin, it's easy. There's a saying too that science advances from funeral to funeral.
Yeah.
Right. So it's easy to say, oh, people are scared of the volatility. No one understands it. No one's ever going to adopt it. It's like you're taking a very static view of the human race. What are people actually doing is that they're individually pursuing their self-interest. They're looking for the best tool for the job. And over time, as money printing, government intervention, coercion, crime creates more of these problems that Bitcoin solves, you're going to create more demand for Bitcoin, right? We, like adults today, might not understand it. But kids that grow up with Bitcoin as part of their milieu will understand it. You know, if not intellectually, then by necessity.
How many people own gold?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Basically nobody. It's been around for thousands of years. I'm just telling you, the average person they're never going to do it. Like the only punchline is people must become aware of the nature of government and hold their government accountable. Like, and maybe that's also never going to happen.
I think there's a lot of people that own gold. The American culture is not a gold owning culture, but
10% of Americans own 93% of the assets. So I'm just telling you, in America alone, 90% of people own fuck all for assets.
Yeah.
That includes gold. So it doesn't happen. Most people are so caught up in their day-to-day lives trying to make ends meet that they don't think to invest in anything.
That's my key point, though, is that the trying to make ends meet over time will become more and more of a requirement to have Bitcoin to make those ends meet.
Well, so
if you're trying
I think
to
what you
escape
mean
hyperinflation, or you're trying to escape capital controls, or you're trying to escape outright seizure, right? Whether you're broke or you're a billionaire, wealth redistribution, or whatever the thing is, like you will need recourse to non-state digital cash to do that thing.
Yeah, but it's been available forever and people don't do it.
It's been available for 17 years.
No. You're thinking of Bitcoin.
Bitcoin. Gold and Bitcoin are not the same.
Yes, but
you cannot put $100 million of gold up your ass. We already talked about this.
Yeah, but nobody cares about that. Like, look,
people do care about that.
No, they really don't, man. They don't. Really
you don't think people care about fleeing with their purchasing power intact?
No, I don't.
If you have the option, someone's invading you, and you're like, oh shit, we got to leave.
Yes.
Do we want to leave with all of our money or none of our money?
In that moment, people would suddenly care. But the vast majority of people just are not thinking about that. It's like literally in this interview alone, the number of times that I've thought, because you're so smart, I don't think you make contact with the people that, like, for them, this is just like, what?
Yeah.
They have no idea what you're talking about. The lack of fear for you is because you know how to navigate the world. So your fear is proportionate to the amount of things that you think will catch you off guard. And you think very few things are going to catch you off guard. And that's probably true because you have an intellect. The bad news is half of people are dumber than the average person. So I'm just saying, you just have to look at the numbers. Like there are a few numbers that are just like, oh, 90% of people in America just don't have assets. Like that's wild. Yeah. So we are in a situation where if the government is abusing you, it's game over. And I'm just saying the government doesn't have to abuse you, but it is currently because people don't understand how to deal with that. So listen, I'm hardcore Bitcoin. I don't want anybody to be confused. I'm just saying Bitcoin does not solve the problem I'm trying to solve, which is how do we make sure that the average person is not being just absolutely economically raped. And then they wonder like, what the hell's going on? I can't make ends meet. This is crazy. And like, if you say Bitcoin is the solution, it's like saying gobbledygook. Like what?
Yeah. No, look, I mean, I don't know. I feel like I agree and disagree with this. So it's, Bitcoin can prevent people from being economically predated upon, right? Or economically taken advantage of, right?
For sure.
It does
you just
definitely
have to get people to hold Bitcoin.
You have to understand it, right? So this is why like a lot of Bitcoiners just say, just study Bitcoin. Like you have nothing to lose. Now, but I think maybe the deeper point of disagreement is you seem to be having this pessimism on kind of the intellectual capacity of the human race. And I would agree. Like you look out in the world today, there's a lot of idiots and there's people voting socialists into office and like, yeah, okay, there's a lot of dumb shit going on. But when I look across human history, like how far we've come, right, I really think we're very adaptive and we have developed cultural norms and intellectual norms and mental math and spoken language. Like we've developed a lot of things that we didn't have 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 years ago.
Yes.
So I think our capacity to evolve makes me very optimistic about the more distant future. Now, the point of transition could be choppy, could be dicey, could be the collapse of the medieval church in the 21st century type of thing. Like, who knows? But I'm optimistic about the digital technology enabled future. And I think that we are engaging in like a reciprocal reconstruction with these machines, right? That when the incentives to violence go down, I think people will become less violent.
What do you think about AI?
Very mysterious, but a massive productivity enhancer. So anything that increases productivity is going to increase the purchasing power of money. And I also think AIs, if they're going to interact and, engage in any economic activity between themselves, will have to make use of Bitcoin.
Do you think that we become post-economic?
No.
Ooh, say more. You're the first person I've heard say no to that.
Space and time will always be scarce. And the wants of the human heart will always be larger than, whatever is available, no matter how much is available. People will always, man's reach always exceeds his grasp. We always want more. So that is the definition of scarcity. Wherever demand exceeds supply, there is scarcity. Okay. So I don't think demand can ever be fully satiated.
But what do you do in a world where there is an entity that's better than you at everything?
Oh, you do well, first of all, if it's better than you at everything and it's solved like a lot of the economics problems, well, then you don't have to really work for a living, right? You have all the food and luxuries you could possibly want at the snap of a finger, in theory. What do people do? I don't know. Do they, go on busying themselves with the furtherance of the human race? Do they do some artistic things? Do they go explore the stars? Like what? I don't know. We're explorers. Who am I to say what we will do? But I don't think scarcity, understood in the proper economic sense, is even possible to be eliminated. The closest thing we could get to is if we broke thermodynamics and developed free energy, right? Or 0-point energy, as Friston's called it. And then you would really have like anything you wanted at the snap of a finger. It'd be pretty close to post-economic, but you still can't occupy the same space at the same time. You're still immortal. Like there's still scarcity. Even in that like kind of heaven on earth scenario, you still have scarcity.
So you think there'll be some sort of competition for Malibu real estate, as an example?
Well, I don't know about that per se. I'm just saying demand will always exceed supply in at least some categories, right? Like not every category. Air is a good example, right? We don't price air because the supply is so super abundant. Even though it's very essential to life, our demand is less than the supply. So it's not scarce. So we don't price it. We don't fight over it, right? But other goods, gold, food, water, et cetera, we do price and fight over those things. So I don't know which specific asset categories would be, possibly become non-scarce, but I don't think all could become non-scarce because again, space and time. How are you going to make space and time non-scarce? I mean, maybe you solve death and make people immortal. It's okay.
I think
then
you
fix
will.
time. I don't believe in that either. But how do you solve space?
How do you solve space? Meaning that, so going back to the Malibu real estate thing. So that is an interesting question. I'll get to that, but let me speed run what I think happens. Given that there's essentially nobody anymore that says that compute will asymptote, so it's just going to go on forever. The gap between a definitional moron and Einstein is only 2.4x.
What does that mean?
That Einstein was only 2.4 times smarter than a moron who's at like a 70 IQ.
Oh, okay.
So moron has a definition. I think it's 70 IQ roughly. So I ran the math once. Einstein was 2.4x in IQ that. So that's the difference between the US government won't even use you as cannon fodder in the military because you'll cause more problems on the way to getting shot, and being able to intuit the physics of the universe. So that's 2.4x. Now imagine something that's 1,000x, right? So you get into the point where energy costs will be zero. Once energy costs are zero.
Do you mean actually zero or near zero?
I mean actually zero.
So you think we're going to break thermodynamics?
No, I think that robotics and material science will get to the point where you can capture more energy from the sun than everybody using everything at all times during the day, no matter how much, whatever they're doing. Like they just will never be able to reach the amount of energy that is being kicked off by the sun.
Okay.
And given that, we'll be able to get that level of energy. And the first wave of robots will cost money, but Optimus is already today, as of the recording of this podcast, coming off the line at 20K. I am going to be getting a $1,000 robot for my house one for each floor. I'm not kidding. To run security. Those are already for sale at $1,000. So labor is going to drop to nothing when energy drops to nothing. That certainly happens within the next 30 years, probably a lot faster. But let's just say 30 years. So 30 years from now, energy cost is zero, labor is zero. Now we're post scarcity at that point, except for there'll be occasional things like we can't occupy the same space and people will fight over that for sure.
And Bitcoin.
And so the question becomes like, what are we doing about that? It's just Bitcoin becomes a question of, is there some small number of things and we say Bitcoin is the thing and whoever has the most, like that's who gets that? Maybe that could very well be true. But the real thing for me is when that happens, meaning and purpose is gone. And that's where I think this all changes.
Why does meaning and purpose have to be gone when we're in conditions of superabundance and freedom?
Because of the way the human mind works. So evolution.
So we need to be load bearing or challenged to have meaning.
Yes.
Okay. So you fear that with no challenge, no load to bear, we're just going to be aimless.
That is correct.
Hedonistic.
That's one of the 4 paths. So I see there's 4 paths before us. Path number 1 is you go to Mars and you play a survival crafting open world game on hardcore mode. Option number 2 is New Amish. So you reject technology, you go live on a field like a Mennonite. Option number 3 is a brave new world, what you're talking about, drugs and sex. And then option number 4 is Neo in the Matrix. So you live inside of a virtual world, but you're awake. And so you're essentially eternally playing a video game where you can optimize the challenge perfectly, have real relationships inside of it. That's the future. Like that to me is exciting, but it is a very different world, a very different world.
I mean, I hear you. I find it to be optimistic though. I mean, when I see productivity, optionality, freedom, purchasing power, all these things going up and the incentives for people to, violently accord themselves with one another going down, these all seem like arrows pointing in the right direction for me. Now, loss of meaning, sure, we're in a meaning crisis. I don't know if you've talked to John Vervaeke. He's my favorite guy to listen to. So many levels of brilliant articulation of the problem and like tracing it all the way back. Like it's amazing. I'm not saying Bitcoin's just going to like fix the meaning crisis, but we definitely have a big issue. Like as far as engineering problems we can solve for immediately, like this one's just obvious. It's like your entire global economy runs on a scam. How about we just stop that first? Then we can start dealing with the meaning crisis and all these other things. So I am not a pessimist about innovation. I think that it is what makes us human. The fact that we make tools, the fact that we create things that then, again, reciprocally enhance us in a way. Like we're kind of like co-captains in our own evolutionary process. And so I'm excited about these things. Of course, they bring new challenges, but I don't subscribe to a worldview in which, man, we've solved scarcity or almost solved scarcity. And now everyone's like, man, life sucks. So there's nothing to do. It's like, what are you talking about? Like I would think we'd be exploring the stars, or maybe we invent teleportation, or maybe we're going to other dimensions, or maybe there's a psychedelic revolution or a religious awakening. Like I think people will find something to do. And the difficulty of all of this is that we are living in the statist paradigm, so that anything we say, any speculation we make about the future, we're sort of interpreting it through that lens. People are dumb today. Oh, people don't have meaning. It's like, that's why it's important to look backwards, right? They say, if you don't know where you come from, then you don't know where you're going. And so looking at the progression humanity has made across history, I think gives me a lot of optimism about our future trajectory.
I love it. All right. I would stay and chat forever, but I got to get to the airport. Where can people follow you on your journey to do all that amazing stuff?
Yeah. Thank you for coming to Miami and doing this. Always fun. I'm at Breedlove22 on X, and then whatismoneypodcast.com.
I love it. All right, everybody. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe. And until next time, my friends, be legendary. Take care. Peace. If you like this conversation, check out this episode to learn more. The U.S. is adding $1 trillion to the national debt every 100 days. And the interest payments alone now cost more than our entire military budget. Our rate of debt accumulation has pushed us